not entertaining any notion of verses 9 and following being original, but I mean, do you think that is the original ending, or do you think there was like a longer ending
I
lost,
know
or like,
it's
what do you
so
think?
there's so many facets to this whole thing, right? So just real quickly for our listeners and viewers, and this might not be apparent to you depending on the Bible translation you're reading, but if you have a modern Bible translation, you probably have verses 9 through 20 in brackets. And the reason for that is our earliest manuscripts stop at verse 8 with they fled the tomb because they were afraid. End of story. So it kind of, that's what Tim means, is kind of like it ends sort of anticlimactically. So, there's various theories. Did we lose the original ending to the gospel? Was Mark sort of a text in process, never quite finished, that became the source for Matthew and Luke? I tend to think that there is good reason for thinking it ended at verse 8. It's a very odd and shocking ending, but there are other ancient texts that end in odd and shocking ways as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of lean in that direction. And I do think at a literary level, at the very least, it's highly satisfying to see the end of Mark in this open-ended way. So it kind of calls for participation and reflection. You do kind of end in shock, and then you got to ask yourself, oh my, the tomb is empty. Maybe I haven't seen the risen Christ yet, but if he is indeed raised and the tomb is empty, then maybe I should tremble a little bit in awe and fear of what are the implications of that. And now I got to think about all of life in light of Jesus. And then I go back to the beginning of the story and I start reading it again. I think Mark is designed for constant recitation in a church context, where you're going through the story over and over again and seeing how it all connects together, and then you're reading Jesus's baptism no longer just as his baptism, but as your baptism. You're baptized, you're called son of daughter, you're cast out into the wilderness to be tried, and you begin this journey of faith with Jesus. So I think it's designed to kind of lead to that sort of reflection, even to get us to think like, okay, the women fled the tomb in fear. That can't be where the story ends, though, because we have the gospel. So
and we are a church here listening to it.
We're here listening to it. So at some point they must have overcome their fear, but empowered by the Spirit to preach the gospel. And now we're in that line kind of to continue on. So it kind of, I think, much in the way that Acts ends. Although Acts, grammatically, Acts ends more elegantly than Mark, but much in the same way, I think it's inviting us into an open-ended story. The story is not finished; it's you're continuing on. You see, Jesus is the first preacher of the gospel. He those are his first words. He's preaching the gospel. The kingdom of God is at hand. Now you go preach what Jesus preached. You embody that message, right? So I
plus, because it's like, when he. Oh, the message that the young man wants the women to tell the disciples, his disciples and Peter, is he's going to meet you back in Galilee.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like, all right, what if we went back up north and started over? Like, how would it go?
That's
you know what I mean?
Kind of like a reset.
Yes.
Right. And we get that meeting in the Gospel of Matthew, so in our canonical frame, we get that meeting. But Mark kind of invites us, like, go reset.
Start over. How should it go?
Yeah.
Also, I think that Mark, it's weird saying this in light of your opening note that Mark is the most neglected of the four in the history of the church. Although maybe that says more about the church. Well, it says a lot about the church, but
it's Matthew, that jerk. He had to write a longer gospel,
more elegant,
more elegantly put together. Yeah.
I think the ending is, first of all, it's very punk rock. It's like the ultimate mic drop of a gospel writer, or it's just like, here's your gospel. Here's your gospel. You want one of these? But it's just so punk rock. It's so it's just so upsetting to kind of all the expectations.
Yeah.
But it's also genius in that it's gonna is it Dodds that said that parables are they tease the mind into active thought. So it's like, it's so provocative of reflection and investigation. It makes you curious. Like I remember one of my favorite films are like Coen Brothers films, and The one that I've watched so often, I just watched it this last week, is No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the first time that I watched it in a theater with a bunch of my friends, and I was sitting next to my friend Bob, and he had already read the novel, and the ending is very awkward. It's so odd, and something totally unexpected and random happens right before the penultimate scene, or in the penultimate scene, and then in the final scene, there's like one of the main characters tells his wife what dreams he had the night before, and then the movie just ends. And I remember turning to Bob and being like, "What was that?" And he goes, "Think about it." And I honestly, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I watched it again. I picked up the novel and read the novel. And I went back through to just try to figure out like what is going on and how how is that ending coherent? And the coherence is genius. But then even if you look online and look up, ending of No Country for Old Men, there are loads of discussions about
it. It opens up
it opens up discussions and it provokes curiosity. So I think it's absolutely genius.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.